G'day guys and welcome. My name is Michael and I am the Deadaussiegamer, here to share with you my tips, tricks, ideas and strategies for playing and running tabletop role-playing games. Today's player archetype video, we are going to be discussing the Competitaur. That's right, I like play on words, leave me alone. Look, I want to say something. There's a bit of a disclaimer at the start of this. As always, we're going to be talking about this player archetype, not just defining what the archetype is, but how to bring out the most from these type of players at your table. But I also want to say that with the Competitaur in particular, there is a lot of toxicity that sits under the umbrella of the Competitaur. I want to say this outrightly. If you have traits of a Competitaur, that does not make you a Competitaur. But there are some lessons to be learned in today's video. So do stay true to it. Don't interpret it as me coming after you as an individual, because I'm not. I am actually looking more specifically at the worst elements of the Competitaur, and hopefully some of that will actually stick and apply to those people who do want to look at improving that gameplay. So, without any further ado, let's talk player traits. Now, there are three major player traits that I see from every Competitaur. Number one, validation. A Competitaur for me is someone who is seeking some form of recognition for playing the game. Whether or not it's them as a character coming up with a smart idea, or them as a player coming up with a brilliant build for their character that is working seamlessly through the story. Hell, it could even be a player who is comparing themselves as a GM to that game. Going to that point where you're like, I ran this module a while ago and this is what I did. My players really loved that because I came up with this huge story and it involved this one very specific player. Maybe you should look at some player background stories. That validation, that look of recognition, can definitely cause some tension during your gameplay. The second trait that I see from them is comparison. Not just simply looking for validation for themselves, but to also compare themselves to the other members of the table. This could be something about, I killed the most people. I did the most damage. I soaked the most damage. Did you see how I solved that entire encounter without us needing to get into a fight? How good am I? Comparing yourselves in a team-based game works for you and against you. It works for you because, well, it does mean that other people around you are encouraged to try and raise their level of game, to, play harder or to role play better or to even build characters or make wiser decisions for character building. However, when unsolicited comparisons happen, well, that's when you start creating a bit of animosity and tension at your game. So, yeah, that's something as well. The third trait, and probably the most noteworthy trait, is the unsolicited nature of competitive advice. Competitive advice is always for this magical term, better role-playing. I don't think there's such a thing as better role-playing. There's just role-playing. I mean, yeah, sure, there's bad role-playing, but that doesn't mean there's good role-playing. No, I'm joking. So what I mean when I say this, when a competitive player or Competitaur gets into their head that they need to improve or that they need to somehow enhance the role-playing of the table that they're on, especially if they're not the GM, it can be seen really poorly when they start giving backseat advice to other players at the table. And I feel like these three particular elements make a Competitaur, and they definitely make someone who is definitely going to struggle at a role-playing session. Actually, you know what? I will mention this as well. As a general observation, I find that most Competitaurs are actually in public games than private games. From what I've discussed with people who have played on my tables, they don't really see too many people who get into that way that last too long at private games. Either they sort of mellow out because everyone is pretty mellow and pretty chill, or they sort of find another person who is also competitive, and these two people, or multiple people just start, building up on each other, or they get thrown off the table and find public games to play. Just a common observation, nothing to do with this actual video, but yeah, fun fact for you. Character design. Character design for the Competitaur. This, I'm going to throw out some very toxic words, but I want you to remember We're not talking about any specific individuals here. But there are words for competitors and their designing method. Quite often, you will find that they are things like min-maxers, power gamers, and munchkins. People who build mechanically to either abuse, exploit, or take advantage of the rules in order to get a leg up above what they should really be achieving. Now, this is a very interesting viewpoint. In a competitor's mindset, there is no average. There is no, this is what my level should be. There is just simply the, how do I get the most out of my character? This could be, my character is a person who uses a sword. Okay, fantastic. Now, what are the feats associated with sword play? Oh, it's this big list of feats. Okay, cool. I'll take these ones because these seem like the best ones. Now that I've got a sword in one hand, I've got this free hand. What do I want to do with it? I know. I'll put a shield in it. What feats are associated with this shield? Put those in. Cool. Sooner or later, you'll find your character with a power build. Now, power builds inherently aren't terrible. The terribleness comes from that comparative nature that I mentioned before. When a competitive player starts comparing the damage that they deal with their, whether or not intentional or otherwise, their optimized build versus, say, someone who is playing casually, you'll find that their revels, their enjoyment of their powered character will sometimes shut down and make the other players feel rather inferior. So the first bit of advice, I guess, towards repairing or building up on the competitor's character design elements is, if you are a competitor and you are designing a character, I want you to remember one clear thing. Everything that you have at your disposal does not need to be worn on your sleeves. Sometimes the coolest thing you can actually do is hold back on your trump card. Keep something in reserve. Hold it in your pocket and wait for that glorious moment where this giant dragon is bearing down upon you, you have no other resources, and you unlock the full potential of your character. That for me is way more interesting than going literally full bore on every single goblin, guard, bandit, gremlin, mimic, whatever that you come across. Hold back. Allow the other players to rise to the challenge as well. Sometimes that simple consideration can make all the difference between a tolerable competitor and a completely intolerable one. Now, this is not to say that all competitive characters are built with min-maxing and power gaming and all this other stuff in mind. One thing that I think many competitors do is they take the tools that they have and they try to make the most out of it, which is fantastic. And if you, as a competitor, want to really get the most out of that, if you really want to try that, one of the biggest kicks I've ever gotten as a somewhat competitor myself has been playing a pre-generated character. Have your GM construct something for you and say, I will roleplay something that you will give me. That way I'm challenging myself to use what's on my sheets. And, well, quite frankly, it makes it a lot easier. It makes it so much simpler because I am now challenging myself, not challenging other people to try and rise up to me. So that's a very interesting and very cool tip. And I hope you guys use it because it worked wonders for me. All right, teamwork. How do you work in a team? Well, honestly, competitors are very tricky in that sense. As again, we were mentioning validation and obviously that comparison. When those elements are at play, you're not really looking at teamwork. You're looking at you're doing your thing, they're doing their thing, and you're seeing how the both of you are going. If you really want to explore teamwork as a competitor, then what you want to do is you want to stop comparing yourself to other people. Allow your players to engage in the encounter. Expand your own mindset. It's not just about what your character is capable of, but what every other member of your team is capable of. I will now issue a challenge to all people who fall under the competitor umbrella. If you think that you are competitive, if you think for a moment that you are a really great role player or a fantastic builder, or that whenever you go to a game, you are the strongest person at that table, I will say this. The strongest people at that table ensure that every single element, every single person at that table has a moment to shine in every scene. If you can do that, then you will take the crown of the most valuable player. Because the most valuable player isn't someone who stands atop a mountain by themselves. It is someone who brings their entire team safely to the summit of that mountain, and they all stand there together to enjoy the view. That's being a true competitor, being right up there. Anyway, I should have left that for last, but I didn't. That's fine. We'll keep going. Playing with a competitor. Very tricky. Very, very tricky. It's hard to tell people to not take it personally when people are comparing themselves to you. It hurts. It makes you feel like your character is not strong. It makes you feel like your character isn't even worth being there. That another player who is playing better than you are is more well suited to dealing with the scenarios and dealing with this game than you ever will be. There is no way to say that you to bottle that up and not take it personally. So instead, I offer this. If you are playing with a competitor, maybe take the time to outline boundaries. With a particular game I was playing a summoner character, a person who conjured monsters and the like to fight for me instead of my character fighting. It was always my intention to build a utility-based character, and the frontline fighter of our group, who was playing a cleric-like character, approached me with a concern. Because I had the ability to summon powerful monsters, they felt as though they really didn't get a chance to shine in the field that they had chosen. They had decided to be the frontline character, and I had decided to be the utility spellcaster. And so, by simply bringing that to my attention, I was able to then dial it back to go, well, that's fair enough. You're supposed to be the fighter. I'm supposed to be raising you up. So I started looking at other uses for my summons. I actually got to a point where I'm summoning monsters, then draining my monster's strength and even size, and then casting it and enhancing our frontline fighter, which was great. It was a really fun idea. But that kind of communication, just opening up and telling the competitor, hey, listen, I have something that my character is good at. I would like the opportunity to just explore it. More often than not, the competitor is not trying to be a jerk. More often than not, they're just unaware. They're oblivious to it. Because one of the things about being competitive is you never look at the person in second place. You don't think about the impact of your victory on a person behind you in a race, you know? And in the same way, when you get into the habit of role-playing competitively, you don't think about that sort of stuff. So having a competitive person be stopped, approached, and spoken to about it will often shake those shingles out, and will get to that point where the player will most likely respect what it is you're trying to achieve. At least that's my hope. All right, last but not least, the weaknesses. Now, a competitor, we've already spoken about many of the weaknesses. Obviously, being competitive can create a lot of animosity. Being competitive can also, basically just, create a lot of animosity. But one other thing that you can often find is that being competitive may seem like a challenge, may seem hard or difficult, but there's a certain point where I feel, as a GM, that competitors are repetitive. And that repetitiveness is, in my view, unoriginal. When I see a barbarian, for example, I think to myself, please, 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 please do not have a great sword. Not because I don't think the great sword's great, but because, quite frankly, every barbarian I see has a great sword. And what's that? You've got power attack? No way. Let me guess. Furious focus? Yep. And cleave? Ah, yep. And, I can basically backwards build their character because I've dealt with it. Oh, you're playing a kineticist. Fantastic. Just because, you want... Oh, right. And, of course, you're doing all the damage and things like that for that. A rogue with a permanent invisibility ability. Fantastic. These ideas are great ideas. Don't get me wrong. They're always fantastic ideas. But the game's been out for, decades. People have come and gone. The forums have forgotten people who have come up with ideas that brand new players are just spawning now. The weakness, I think, for a lot of competitors is when you start playing at that high level game and when you start using all of those skills and all those tools and stuff like that, you lose out on the unique and original elements of your character and your gameplay. So have a think about that. How can you, whilst being competitive, get the most out of the originality of your character? Maybe don't use the most obvious weapons. Maybe don't use the most obvious solutions. Work with your team and try to make the most unlikely things happen. That is where I find competitors will make absolute magic. Pushing yourselves to the boundaries when you know what those boundaries are is easy. Pushing your boundaries when you have no idea what that outcome might be, when you have all the odds stacked against you, that is where you will truly shine. Thank you so much, guys, for listening. I hope this wasn't too depressing because, like I said, there's a lot of toxicity, I think, that comes from competitor talk and all that. So it's not my intention to victimize anyone. Again, I am myself, in a lot of ways, very competitive. But if this video did help you out, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, leave a comment and let us know. If you've got any other suggestions or anything you'd like me to clarify, leave a comment as well. I love chatting with people and I love exploring ideas. If you want to help us out, go check out all the other links in the description below. And if you want to support the Dead Aussie Gamer, then head on over to our Patreon page at patreon.com/DeadAussieGamer. And yeah, you can help support us. And I think we've actually still got a few seats on some games as well. So if you want to come and join us on any of our role-playing games that we have, yeah, go check us out there. Till next time, guys, as always, game hard or die trying. See you guys.